Welcome to this episode of The Successful Encore Career. I'm Brett Johnson, longtime volunteer at Employment for Seniors. This episode is being brought to you in part by Nationwide Insurance, Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging, InnoSource, and Circle 270 Media Podcast Consultants. With me, as always, is Carol Ventresca. Carol, welcome to the show again.
How are you, Brett?
I'm doing fine.
Good. We have another exciting show today.
Oh, yeah.
And we welcome Bill Lafayette, who is the owner of Regionomics, which is a consulting business working with clients in public, private, academic, and not-for-profit sectors to understand and grow their local economies and businesses. Bill is also the president of the Employment for Seniors Board of Trustees. He also served with the Columbus Chamber as the vice president of economic analysis for 12 years. So, Bill, welcome to another podcast program, Successful Encore Career Podcast. We really appreciate you coming back to see us again.
Well, thanks for having me back.
It's actually been a long time because you were on episode number 1.
Yes.
If anybody wants to go back and hear about you and your successful Encore career transition, go back to episode number 1.
And I would say the same thing today that I said back then, only maybe more so.
Good. I'm glad I don't have to delete that episode.
Exactly. That started our program. We are now into close to 90 programs. And
that makes you a granddaddy.
Oh, I tell you what,
I am the podcast world. You are anyway, but you know.
Exactly. So Bill, you got us off on the right foot for the podcast program, and it just keeps growing. So we are to business here. Bill has traditionally for more than 12 years. How many years you've done?
20 years.
The blue chip forecast for Central Ohio.
This is my 20th annual forecast.
It's amazing. A lot of change over those 20 years.
Very much so.
Yeah.
So Central Ohio has had years of growth. It's amazing how much growth has happened after the recession that hit us so badly. And we always sort of laugh about how many cranes that you see in the sky. That's how you can sort of tell what's going on in a community. But the new blue chip forecast paints a different picture today. So can you give us some highlights of what we should expect to happen over the next year or so?
Well, we certainly have had a whole lot of growth. We're up more than 21% in jobs since the recession ended, compared to 15% or so for the national average. This forecast, though, is not flashing a red light. It's kind of flashing a yellow light. For several years during the expansion, we were seeing growth 2.3, 2.5, 2.7% year over year. This year, I'm predicting growth of 1.2%. For 2019. But just to put that in context, yes, it is the weakest growth that I've forecast since the recession ended, but it's also stronger than any year that we had in the expansion that preceded that recession.
Oh, interesting.
So we've had a very, very good run. We're up to 1.1 million jobs in the region. And things are looking this year like they'll slow down a fair amount.
So we had a growth spurt after the recession that sort of caught us up a little bit.
Yes.
And now we're sort of back to a norm.
Yes. Although, if we get 1.2% based on the national level forecasts, we will underperform the national average in 2019. We did by a little bit in 2018 unless they change the numbers, which they will do in March.
Okay.
So let's take a look at the industries that have traditionally been strong in Central Ohio, as well as our lack of workers. Have they hurt these industries?
Well, actually, the reason why I'm predicting slower than average growth in 2019 is for that very reason, for the most part, that we just don't have the growth in workforce that we really need to sustain the kind of growth that we were seeing earlier in the recovery. Where we're seeing it the most is in sectors like construction, transportation, leisure, administrative support. Those were industries that were really, really strong. And in some cases, they've kind of hit a brick wall. As a result, that's kind of dragging down the entire economy. Those are the industries that I hear employers screaming the loudest that they need workforce.
Interesting. Bill, you recently gave a talk and presented the blue chip forecast at the Columbus Metropolitan Club. And there was an article in the Columbus Dispatch regarding that luncheon. One of the things that you mentioned, which we were really excited about, that got carried in the Dispatch, was that a way to embrace this issue of lack of workers were for employers to look at targeting other populations of people, including our not only our immigrant population, but our senior workers. And so do you have some words of wisdom or tips for the employers and our mature job seekers out there who are listening?
For the employers, I would caution them that they ignore the population of mature job seekers at their peril. And here's why. 16, 20 year of age to 50 year of age population is going to be growing at less than 1% per year, is currently growing at less than 1% per year, and is projected to maintain that very slow growth rate for the next 10 to 15 years at least. And so, given the fact that we traditionally have growth in the 1.2, 1.3% range, and we've had much stronger growth in employment in recent years, you just cannot maintain that level of growth without tapping populations that you really are not thinking about. If you extend the working age population upward, you see much stronger growth simply because it is the upper end of that population, the population 50 years and older, that's really going to be growing the most. So that's my caution for the employer, but my words of wisdom, such as they are for the job seeker, 50 and older, is you are in a very good position as long as you can find an employer who understands that you can make a really powerful contribution to their business.
What advice would you give? Let's look at the employer first.
Mm-hmm.
What do they need to address to welcome these mature workers into their place of work? If they have not gone that direction before, and now they know they have to, and maybe that's not necessarily a culture change, but there's some different thought processes going on. It's like, now I'm not hiring a 35-year-old person now. I'm looking at a 55-year-old.
I think it's a mental shift, because the sad fact is that ageism is alive and well. Mm-hmm. If you are going to welcome older workers into your company, you really need to walk the walk. You really need to infuse that point throughout the organization, because you, the business owner, are likely not to be doing the hiring unless you have a very small business. So you may have HR folks who really need to understand that this is an important, vital thing that they need to embrace in order to maintain the growth of your business.
And so let's look at it from an employee standpoint, our clients and Employment for Seniors, and trends that may be going on that are going to be different than they're used to. as independent contractors, as
Yes.
employment situations, what would you suggest our listeners start to embrace, start to be open to that? This is probably the way it's going to be for you to get this position or these positions that are going to become available to you because the shift in how employers are hiring.
I started my business when I was 53 years old. I am part of a trend. I really am. And I suppose folks my age typically think about going out and applying for jobs and getting hired on as in a company. But the self-employment route is a very viable career option as long as you've got the nerve to do it, because you have to take 3 or 4 deep breaths and recognize that building a business takes time. So that's one angle. Another angle is just the idea that you don't apply for jobs the way you did 20 years ago. Everything is online now. There are portals such as Ohio Means Jobs, Indeed, and so forth. That's the way you apply for jobs now. And so you just need to familiarize yourself with those methods of getting yourself in the door.
Yeah, and I think something that comes to mind too is that your steady stream of employment could be it's project to project to project. And that's a different mindset for an employee to grasp that over maybe a 5-year period, you've worked on 5 different projects.
Yeah.
But it's steady income, but you're in the system for this project.
Or in my case, maybe 90 or 100 projects over the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
One of the other things that actually happened during the recession, but I think it has been steady throughout, is so many of our clients came from private industry, never once thought about looking at nonprofit organizations as potential employers, education. They didn't see themselves doing anything. And we have a lot of folks who have stretched past those limits that they had given themselves. And because during the recession, the only folks who were hiring were the nonprofits, literally. And it worked very, very well. And we've continued that. So that's another tip. But yes, online applications are a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, another issue facing job seekers is the need for training, of course, updating your skills or building new skills. Any suggestions?
Well, I have spent probably the last 15 years talking to employers in all sorts of different industries about what they're looking for in the folks walking in the door to take jobs. What they say is obviously a need for technical skills, a need for computer skills, because most jobs nowadays are, at least to some degree, computer driven. But what they say an awful lot that they want to see and they're not seeing is what are called soft skills, workplace skills, the ability to communicate effectively, the ability to interact appropriately with supervisors, with peers, with customers, the ability to think and problem solve, the ability to develop a leadership mindset. I had an employer who ran a manufacturing firm, and he told me that one of the big things that he recruits for is leadership skills. He wants his entry-level employees at least to have the potential of developing leadership skills. And why is that? Simply because so much of manufacturing now is done in a team environment, and manufacturers need people to lead those teams. That need for soft skills is absolutely pervasive, and it's much stronger than you would think in jobs like an entry-level manufacturing worker.
And all those adjectives that you just laid out, that's mature, worker right there. They have
Right.
this. They have everything because of their life skills, their life getting up to this point.
They more likely have the soft skills than the technology.
Right.
But at the same time, you gotta check yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we just want to thank Bill for joining us today, and
thank
we
you.
appreciate all this information. If you are interested in more regarding Bill's blue chip forecast for 2019, you can go to the Regionomics website or Facebook page and find that information. And we are also going to have it posted on the Employment for Seniors website too. So thank you again, Bill.
Thank you both.